Folks, Why Would You Ask That is a podcast that answers some of the weirdest questions. A lot of those are inappropriate for some listeners. If you're squeamish, easily disturbed, or just having a bad day, this may not be for you. But if you've got to know the answers like we do, stay tuned.
Why Would You Ask That? Hosted by me, M, they, them, and
Karen, she, her, and
Remy, he, they.
And today we are talking about cults, and it's a really vast topic. We're just going to be scraping through and seeing what we could get out of it.
I feel like we need to give some trigger warnings right at the beginning.
That's a good idea.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. I don't know what you guys are going to be talking about, but from my end, there are trigger warnings related to violence against children and suicide. Oh, and domestic violence.
Any, hints at sexual abuse or anything like that?
A little, but I'm not going to talk about anything in detail. It's basically one sentence.
Okay. From my own, I don't have anything beyond that. The cults I'm going to be mentioning offhand are the suicide ones, or the weird, whatever Rajneesh was doing over there, that was some shit. But I think that covers it.
I think so. Do you have anything, Karen?
The only thing with my cult is, financial and emotional manipulation, I guess. So, just be aware of that, if that is something that upsets you.
The Christians.
Sorry. Yeah. Lots of Christian talk, folks.
So sorry. Mine are also largely Christian-based.
Yeah.
Being one of the dominating religions certainly puts it at the forefront of cultish and weirdo activity.
All right, I'm ready.
Me too. Serve us up on a plate, Remy.
Okay. Well, I think I will assume that everybody knows what a cult is. A cult is a group led by a charismatic leader who's authoritarian and often demands to be revered as some sort of godlike figure. Lots of indoctrination and exploitation of varying types. If you want the history of when cults began, I've got that for you.
I just want to know the main difference between a cult and a religion. Is it the quantity of followers? Is that what changes it for people?
I've got that, actually. Basically, the way that the people who, rank this sort of thing divide a cult from a religion is that if their practices become damaging to themselves or other people, it turns into a cult.
So, you could say certain sects of Christianity are religion, and some are cults.
Sure, if that particular sect of Christianity, and I could name some, but I'm not trying to drag the ones that are still considered religious. Certain branches. Well, I'm thinking of the Quiverfall group, what some people here in Arkansas, some very famous people here in Arkansas practice, which is okay with sexual assault and domestic abuse. I think that should make it count as a cult because it is causing harm to the people who practice it. But thus far, I guess it hasn't become so damaging that the law has decided that they lose their religious status. Things like that, yeah. But the number of members doesn't really matter. I have 2 cults that are existing here in Arkansas right now, currently. And one of them only has 8 members.
Whoa.
But it used to have about 30. And then the other one has had hundreds of members spread out throughout Arkansas and the surrounding states. So the member count doesn't really matter.
Okay. Scientology has so much.
But people have argued that it is a religion. But the thing is that the doctrine might not necessarily state any of these behaviors that would put it under the umbrella of a cult. That's the thing about Scientologists, is they know how to game the system.
Mm-hmm.
True.
they don't have anything in their doctrine that would frame it in that way, but their practices, behind closed doors. We gotta be careful talking about Scientology because they'll come after us.
Yes, they will. They don't even like you thinking about them negatively, basically. But yeah, their practices are certainly not great for their members. And there's a lot of other like mainstream cults. I can call Scientology that, like a mainstream cult, quote quote. Like there's another one called like Nexium, that is basically billed as like self-improvement seminars and whatever, but they got busted for running a sex cult ring.
Ooh. Oh, gee willikers.
So, yeah, so doesn't have to be in the doctrines, it's what the people do that matters. I don't think any cult usually like writes down, thou shalt abuse your women.
I mean, it's in the Bible.
Oh, we're dropping truth bombs today.
Sorry. Let's get back on track.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so basically we were talking about how some sects of Christianity that are harmful to their members, or to the community around them, you could generally consider cult-like, based on the definition that researchers and such give to what makes a cult and what makes a religion. And basically this has been a problem in organized religion since way back with the Roman Empire. The word cult comes from a Latin word, cultus, which means to cultivate. It was used to describe sacrifices, offerings, and monuments built to cultivate favor with the gods. And even back then when the Roman Empire existed, there were cults, or the Roman Empire called other things cults that they didn't like. Like they called Judaism a cult. They called Islam a cult. They called other forms of Christianity a cult. It's been going on with organized religion for a long time. This is probably why so many cults are religious-based of one variety or not.
That makes sense.
Yeah, historically, most new religious movements have been called a cult at some point in its history. And this is because usually a new religious movement, generally a radical one, springs into existence as a result of some sort of like political turmoil or social turbulence. So like dozens of radical little religious movements came into existence during the Renaissance in Europe, such as Christian Kabbalah.
The fuck is that?
Well, Kabbalah is like a word, I think it's taken from Judaism, and it's like the more magical side of Judaism, so I think it's just magical Christianity.
Oh, like the Gnostics. The Gnostics were like a Christian off-branch, considered a cult by the Roman Catholic Church, the Romans at the time. But they believed in a lot of the mysticism. And a lot of people are like, ooh, the Gnostics have some of the ancient texts, or lost books. I believe that their stuff is attributed to there was something to do with those texts that were hidden in those like clay pots in Israel or somewhere. I feel like there was something like that. And people were like, these are the lost books of like Judas or Mary. And it's like,
I vaguely remember either reading something or hearing something about this.
Yeah. The Gnostics, it's like, I just know that they're more of the mystics of Christianity.
Yeah, I think a lot of the big religions have a mystic sect, Back when the Christian Kabbalah, which I think is just the magical Christian group, started up way back during the Renaissance, it was because of the crazy social changes that were happening during that time period. And I think that's probably why it springs up in a lot of these things. What was I going with? Oh, yeah, like India had cults, or things that were considered cults back when the British colonized that subcontinent. Jainism, when it started up, was considered a cult, though I don't think it is considered one anymore. Those things are not things that people think of as cults, but they were thought of as cults at one time, because at one time their beliefs were radical enough that people did not enjoy having them around. Mm-hmm. And America has always had like a particular wealth of we're a very fertile land for cults.
Well, I mean, the history of Christianity I've always thought was very cult. They met in private houses because they couldn't meet in public because they were automatically persecuted. I was always like, this is kind of weird that people just meet in houses and talk about this. And I mean, this is something that still happens to this day as far as different branches of Christianity, and that's what happened with my cult. So,
do you want to talk about your cult experiences now?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a whole lot. Basically, I was at work one day, and I worked in public service. So, is it public service? More like I worked in. It's like a retail / public service environment in which I worked in a gift shop / art gallery / library. People would come in, and it didn't matter your status. If you were there, you treat them like people. And sometimes I'd meet really cool people. I'd meet really cool artists, other townies, people from out of town. But one time, this was pretty early on when I started there, pretty early on in my experience in Arkansas, even. I want to say within my first year. This couple came up and they were talking to us and they were like, "Oh, this place is really beautiful. We just wanted to talk to you all and ask you some questions." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's talk." They asked about faith and things like that, and I'm like, "This is kind of inappropriate to talk about at work." I'm like, "But I am interested in making friends, and if you're faith-based, we can hang." I grew up in Christianity and I was still kind of in that place. So I was like, "Yeah, let's here's my let's exchange contact info and we'll talk later." We met at a cafe, and then we met in a meeting room of the library, and then I met them at their house. And by the time I was meeting them at their house, I was already pretty sure that they were trying to indoctrinate me into something, because the first two meetings they had talked about the first one, they just wanted to get to know me and talk to me, and we just talked about our lives and things like that. He was from here, and not Arkansas, but I think he was from Alaska or something. And then his wife was from Korea, and they were both really nice and friendly. And then we just talked about our lives. That's the first meeting. Second meeting, more private location, where and that's something they specifically asked for, was a place that was more quiet. That's where they kind of opened up to me and explained a little bit more about their church. And they described their church as a very mission-based church, in which they do a lot of community service and a lot of I'm laughing now because I know what that's code for. They do a lot of community service and a lot of outreach and programs in which they help underprivileged communities all across the world. It's global, y'all.
Oh, it's always global.
It's always global. They're like, "You grew up in Christianity, so you get it." And they're like, "What if we told you that Christ already has returned?" And I was like, it's like,
oh,
that's when I was like, I mean, you're going to have to explain a little bit more on that, because at this point, it's just okay, I see what's going on. The whole charade finally ended, and they finally were like, "Here you go. Here's our beliefs." Yeah, they believed that Jesus returned in the body of a Korean man, I think in 1940 something. They believed that he was the savior, the Messiah, and that he was going to lead everyone to heaven. And I was like, "But wouldn't the rapture have already happened or something?" I don't know. And I didn't really pay attention to them after that. I was kind of done with
Checked
that.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay. And they believed in, and I remember this very clearly though. They believed in God, and God lived on through this guy as God the Father. And then there was his wife, who inherited the role of God the Mother, because there's God and then there's the other half, which is God the Mother. And I was like, first of all, there's more than two genders, but whatever. I'm like, that's neat that you all believe that. And they're like, well, do you think that you would like to learn more? And I'm like, not really. You guys seem really nice and I feel like we could be friends, but I'm not really interested in this religion. I'm okay with where I'm at. So from there, we left, and then they invited me over to their house, not to talk about religion, just to have some of her cooking. And I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to try some of that. So I told my husband, I was like, babe, I'm going to some people's house and they are serving food. So if I am not back by this time, call the police. And he's like, okay.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
I'm like, just give me a call first. And then if I don't answer, then call the police. And he's like, okay. And I truly didn't believe that they were anything bad. It's just I've seen this movie before. So like a lot. So
Yeah.
I went to their house. She made some really good food. Like it was pretty much just like snacks. It was like a little kind of like a spring roll. I don't know what it is in Korean, but it was very good. And yeah, we just talked, and their house was kind of empty. They had just moved in, so I was like, oh yeah, I get that. But they kept trying. They were really persistent in like, well, why don't you come to one of our one of our services? They're held here in our house. He's like, I preach, and I'm like, I get it. I get that you're like trying to do something and you really believe in it. It's just not what I believe in. So I'm going to have to pass. And I just felt really uncomfortable. So then I left and texted a few times back and forth, and they just kept trying to get me to come over. And I was like, I'm ghosting you. Goodbye.
Good decision.
And that's the end of my cult story. Yep. Hold on. I know the name of it. An Sang-hung was the gentleman who was the founder of the Church of God Jesus Witnesses. It's since changed its name to the World Mission Society Church of God. They may be all that they claim to be. There's not really anything against them currently, from what I've found. Just a lot of, like, I even tried to look into some of the arguments against them, and really it's just other Christians claiming that these guys are nuts. And I'm like, I mean, you can say that all day long. You say the same thing about Catholics and Baptists and Methodists. I'm like, I don't care. Are they really bad? And I haven't found anything that says that they're incredibly like terrible. It's just they have all of the same practices that or all of the same indoctrination tactics that other cults have used. So, but the argument could be said that all religions have those practices. So,
of all the ones that I've ever come in contact with, yes, this is absolutely true. And I'm talking about mainstream religions. You know, I've been to like a million different Christian churches, and then, you know, they're being approached by Jehovah's Witnesses. My ex-wife's family was Latter-day Saints. It's just like, no matter where you go, a religion just usually employs the same things. And one of the things that always really bothers me is that when somebody approaches you like that, they genuinely believe that they're doing you a favor.
Yeah. That's probably what pisses me off the most.
It's always difficult for me. Like, I feel bad. Though they think they know what's good for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Karen, I'm looking into this cult. It's called the World Mission Society Church of God now, but it is still very much active.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they're very active. They have a really big, beautiful website that you can go to and read all about God and God the Father and God the Mother. Just my favorite thing about them is that they split after their leader died because they were like, oh, his son is now the new Messiah, even though his mom, the son, I think was a product of him and his first wife. And also he was married, but then he started seeing this other lady. And then this new lady, he left his first wife and got with the new lady, and she was the godmother. So it's like, okay, so the first lady, what about her? And I can't find any explanation for it. I think a lot of people probably deny it. Who even knows? I don't really care. I was just like, that's interesting. Yep. It's
Man, they have 100,000 members as of 2013.
Yeah, they like I said, they're global.
Man, you almost got duped into a big one. Like good for you having some common sense.
Well, my parents raised me with that.
I cherish that part of you, the skeptical, like, I don't think so.
This is kind of fishy. Yeah, God. I mean, they were really nice people, and I wish them the best. I just also wish them to not have to take money. I hope that their organization doesn't do what most organizations like theirs do. Also, it's a really common thing in South Korea to proclaim that you're the Messiah.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's like multiple people who have come forward. I mean, I guess it's as common as anywhere, because they do it in America, they do it in Israel, all sorts. Basically, everywhere. Everywhere is like, hey, we've got a Messiah, but he's the real deal.
Man, and the United States has had so many messiahs since like the 1600s when we became a country. We had so many cults just literally spring into existence the second our country became a country.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I was looking at a flow chart during my research.
There's a flow chart.
Yeah, I was looking at a flow chart and starting right when we landed over here and decided to set up colonies, a whole bunch of cults cults, things that would become cults, things that branched into things that are considered religious movements, all started up in the 1600s, like, immediately as soon as we decided to put down roots here in this country.
Oh, well, yeah, the story of Christianity is just a bunch of cults.
That's true. That's very
technically all the denominations are just all different cults.
Do you remember when Catholicism split and then we had two popes and each side was calling the other side wrong? That's cults.
Yep. Yep. There were the Puritans and then the Separatists.
Yeah. Like, I feel like we have to extend a quick word here. Like, there is nothing wrong with being a spiritual person and believing in a higher power, but there is a lot wrong with trying to force those beliefs on other people or taking advantage of their belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I used to work in fast food, there was a lot of customers actually who would, I would be like, here's your food. And they'd be like, this is for you. And hand me one of those tiny Bibles.
Oh, God.
And then you drop
and I'd be like, thanks for this. This'll feed my family. And I'll just...
That's better than me.
Yeah. They always go in the trash. I'm just nice, and so I don't do it in front of them. But guys, if you're one of those people that gives tiny Bibles to just random strangers, they throw them in the trash usually. And that seems pretty disrespectful to the Bible. So maybe stop doing that. Stop handing Bibles to people.
It's gross and annoying, and I hate it.
It's really bad.
Karen mentioned what's it? Thank you. Please give me the word.
Is it Protestants? Because that's early.
Not. It's the people who came over on the boats.
Quakers?
Those are... No, the Puritans and the Separatists. Oh. So the Separatists probably came first. Yeah, and then the Puritans later came.
Thank you. You just said it, and then it went... Just
It's
went
all good.
straight out of my brain. Yeah, okay. Karen mentioned the Puritans and the Separatists who came over and, like, quote unquote, founded this country, founded the white presence in this country, essentially. And so back when that happened, that was obviously an enormous amount of social and political and religious turmoil. And so dozens and dozens of cults and cult-like things started up. Even just from like the New York kind of area. If you start not long after New York became a thing, we had just dozens of full-fledged religions in this country nowadays, like Mormonism and Seventh-day Adventism, that are considered full-fledged religions that sprang up literally in that time period. And then things that became cults, like the Universal Friends, which was led by a woman who had a near-death experience and then came back billing herself as the reincarnated Messiah and mouthpiece of God.
Wow.
And then we have those groups that like straddle the line even nowadays, like the Jehovah's Witnesses. So, and what's really weird about the history of cults and interesting is that cults in early America, it was difficult sometimes to tell the difference between a cult and like somebody pushing for just political change. A good example of this is that up in New York in the 1930s, there was a cult, but run by somebody named Father Divine. They believed Father Divine was a god. But they were also very early proponents of civil rights in America. And so they were leading protests demanding civil rights for the Black community in the 1930s.
There's a lot of, like, politicism that goes along with religion and not getting your way. Most of the communities that were created after the original settlements were because people had differing religious beliefs. Like, literally, guys would have like a thought that was different and they'd be like, I don't like this, and then the town was like, well, then you can leave, and he's like, okay. And then he would leave and start a whole new town where he's like, okay, this is my beliefs. And then somebody in the town would be like, well, I don't really believe that, and he's like, well, okay, you can leave. And then they're like, okay. And then they leave, and then just it kept happening. And it's like, God, these people will not just die. And they just kept spreading smallpox, and it just got worse. I hate them. Sorry, I had to learn a lot of this, like, because, you know, in elementary and middle school, I went to Christian schools, so like this was our history.
That's
It's so dumb. Yeah.
Yeah, really, since like the 1900s, since the Civil War, America has just sort of bred more and more and more and more and more cults because we keep going to war. We've essentially been at war off and on since, you know, when the Civil War happened in the 1800s. Not constantly, but like, man, pretty frequently. And all of that turmoil literally just leads to so many cults coming into existence. Pretty much all culminating in like the 60s through the 80s when there was like a cult boom in this country. This was like when we had Jim Jones and this like mass suicide / murder event at Jonestown where almost 1,000 people killed each other and themselves. And then, like, as I said, a cult is a cult defined as a cult because they are destructive to themselves or the community. And so if you look at like cults that everybody knows about, like Charles Manson convincing his followers to murder a bunch of people in an effort to start a race war, that's a cult. You had Shoko Asahara in Tokyo, who released sarin gas in the subway system that killed a bunch of people. You have Heaven's Gate. That guy convinced his followers that they could pass from this evolutionary level to the next if they castrated themselves and killed themselves.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's the reaction of everybody I've talked to about this. Oh God. Yeah.
Look, I cannot function like that. When somebody tells me to do something, unless I already know why I'm doing it, I usually go, no, fuck that. I even get mad at commercials. They're like, watch this movie. We promise it's good. And I'm like, no, I'm never going to see this movie.
I wonder, and this is not scientific in the least, but I'm very neurodivergent. And I wonder if there's something to do with the neurodivergent brain and how we don't function very well if people aren't telling us why we have to do something that makes us like have a little more common sense. But I bet that's not the case. But
like, I'm sure that in some cases it does help, because like I've always had these issues where, like, if I'm told to do something and I don't understand why or how or anything about it, I will get extremely angry and upset. But, like, I feel like if explained in just the right way, it makes it so that it's easier for me to go along with an idea, even if it's a bad one.
Honestly, I don't think that it's something about being neurotypical that makes a cult, like, hone in on somebody or make somebody more prone to being in a cult. I think it's literally just dependent on the person and their history and what they like. That knocking, it happened again, Em.
It must be Ralph.
your ghost is saying, "Let me in on this conversation."
I have things to say. I think that it really just it's dependent on the person, because we saw a lot of stuff from the Scientology documentaries that we've seen that a lot of people are just born into it. Like, a lot of the people are born into cult, like, not cults, but Christian upbringing can lead people into a cult if the cult members and speakers know the right way to word everything. Because if you are a spiritually minded person, you are more likely to believe somebody who has this. It's more about the leaders and the people who they employ to recruit having a certain sort of confidence that most of the people that get involved in cults, they know exactly what to look for. Like, maybe some big event has happened in which it kind of shatters their belief system, like a divorce or a death in the family, things like that. They kind of like can pick people out, and they prey on those emotions and weaknesses and are like, that's how they rope you in.
Mm-hmm.
You're making very good points, which lead very nicely right into the talk about mind control techniques that cults use to pick out the people that they ask to join them.
Okay.
Are we ready to talk about that?
Fuck yeah!
Mm-hmm.
Social scientists have pinpointed 7 different ways that cults use to slowly indoctrinate you and mind control you into joining them and staying with them. This part of the conversation is where I'm going to talk about my cult experience. I was not raised religious. My parents were like, sure, there's a God, but like, we're not going to do anything about it. We're not going to pray or go to church or anything. You do whatever you want. Are you an atheist? I don't care. You want to be pagan? That's fine. They were very non-actual spiritual at all. I basically raised myself in the middle of the woods. we talked about it on like my first episode here.
Yes.
So this is why the cult that I got involved in was a religious-based cult, but it was a pagan religious-based cult, which appealed to me because I've always not particularly cared for Christianity, which is all that is around when you live in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. And it's shoved down your throat to the point where it makes it difficult to want to participate in that for some people. Number 1 on this list, like Karen said, cult members who are recruiting, and these are often like nice women, young children, things like that, people that don't seem threatening. They look for people who are at a crossroads in their life. People who are going through stability issues can lead to feelings of vulnerability, and the vulnerability can lead you to feeling open to trying new things. So cults will often advertise themselves right out in the open by like the person that tried to recruit Karen just like walked into the store that she worked at and said, you want to go get some food or whatever? And she was like, sure thing. Stuff like that. Or you might see a flyer on like a bulletin board for like a yoga group or something. And you would say, yeah, you know what? I'm having some problems right now. I think I could use some like meditation and yoga. And so you go to this like yoga group. Or they might build themselves as information sessions to learn how to better yourself. or a meeting with a local group of spiritual people in whatever faith that you practice that's brand new to the area. So for me, I hit a point in my life where I was struggling really hard with my sexuality, and we were struggling really hard financially. This was before my children were born. I was like, I changed my major in college. I was having a big identity crisis, basically about every aspect of my life. And then a friend that I had off and on throughout all of high school asked me if I wanted to go to her dad's church. So here's where they get you. I'm going to tell you all this background information so that when I get to the stuff later on, you're going to be like, Remy, why would you believe any of that crap? So this is going to demonstrate to you how cults can really brainwash you. This friend, I'll call her T. T was very abused by her father, and I knew all of this. She's been my friend since we were babies, essentially. My mom and her mom were friends, and then we were friends when we were born. And when she went to live with her dad, I got to hear all about it, basically my whole life, how he was crazy, and that, in my mom's words, he thought he was some sort of wizard living in the woods. And that he abused her really badly, and she kept running away and running away and running away, and there's obviously a reason for that. So when we hooked back up together in high school and became friends again, when she got to go live with her mom, I was fully aware that that was a bad situation. But for, I don't know, a long time, like probably a year before this happened, she had told me that she was getting back together with her dad, that they were going to try to mend their relationship. And then she started talking to me about being pagan. And so I decided I wanted to explore the options that paganism had to offer. I felt like a good calling towards that kind of spirituality. And then she started talking to me about how her dad was a priest in a pagan temple. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, you think that he's a good guy now, so I guess I won't try to convince you not to hang out with him. And then at some point, when I got so bad in my own life, and she suggested, hey, maybe you should go to a meeting at my dad's temple, I was like, yeah, I guess. You know, I'm looking to get out of this rut, and that's step one.
Oh, dear.
Mm-hmm.
So even at this point, I already knew that he was a bad guy, but she had convinced me over the course of about a year that he had changed. And so I was willing to give it a shot. And these two know me enough to know that I'm a pretty logically minded person. So this is already a huge breach of my own common sense.
Yes. Oh my.
Yeah. Where, like, when
Yes.
you said you were in a cult, I was very surprised. I'm like, you don't seem susceptible to cults. I don't understand how that could have happened. But do go
I think
on.
it's very
Yeah, and
surprising,
yet-
though. Like, a lot of people who have, like, a very straightforward and logical mindset end up in these sort of situations.
Well, yeah, just
they're
think
just
about
in it.
Makrinda.
Yeah, I was, you should have seen the Rain Man graphics that were springing up around my head as I tried desperately to remember who that was.
I didn't know who it was at all. I haven't watched Scientology documentaries yet, but I'm getting there.
Ooh, Romany. You know, if some people really can't stand her voice, but I love the way she talks. I'm sorry. I'm obsessed with her. She's great.
Yeah,
Love
my
her.
dad tells me he hates Scientology. He watches all this shit and be like, fuck Scientology. But when I told him about that, he went, Romany? Fuck her. I can't stand her.
Yeah, nobody. I know a lot of people that really don't like her voice, and I'm just like, ugh, I can't get enough of her. Sorry, please
Wow.
continue. Don't mind us.
Anywho, so yeah, that was a big lapse in my own common sense, but I was at a very bad point in my life.
Mhm.
So then they get you with the soft sell, and this is point 2 on the list. Once you go to the first meeting or meditation or what have you, the person who brought you there, or the person who's in charge of the meeting, and this is not usually the leader of the cult that you're meeting, you're usually meeting like a lesser leader, somebody who's like not as batshit crazy as the leader is. So that person or the person you came with will start asking you some probing questions. Are you happy in your life right now? Things in that vein. Are you looking to meet new friends? they can make you feel really welcome, and their goal is to make you feel as welcome as possible. And then they're going to invite you back to continue this process. And they might invite you back one time, or they might invite you straight to a private meeting, depending on, I guess, how they feel you out. But they're just going to keep working on you until they feel that you're susceptible to continuing this process. They will eventually encourage you to go away from the public meeting area. Like Karen's people took them away from like getting food to like a meeting room, a private meeting room in a library, to their house. That's how this works. They'll eventually take you to a more secluded location. So this friend took me straight from, do you want to go to my dad's house, straight to the secluded location. And when I look at this in retrospect, the soft sell was happening for the year leading up to when she asked me to go to her dad's house.
Damn.
Golly.
I didn't see it at the time, but she had really been working on me for a long time. Tried like feeling out. She knew how turbulent my life was at the time and how much I was struggling. And so she had really been pushing for quite a while. So I think this soft sell, in my case, was happening for a good long time. And so we literally went from hanging out in her house, which felt like a safe place to me, straight to her dad's temple. I didn't say the name of it. This thing is called Seeker's Temple, which already sounds like a very culty name.
Yeah.
But I was just wanting to be in the presence of like-minded people. I didn't know a lot of pagans, so they sort of built this place as being like a bastion of intellectual paganism, away from all the other stuff, different from all the other kinds of pagan groups, because, and this is what the dad said, because all those other groups, they're very segregated and closed off and isolated from each other. Why should the Hellenistic pagans be all by themselves? And why should the Norse pagans be all by themselves? Why do the Wiccans, and the Wiccans are not actually in this conversation, he hated Wiccans, but like, why do the Wiccans have to be all alone? We should all be together in just one big unified community of pagans, sharing ideas and community with each other. And if you're listening to this and going, this sounds exactly like a cult thing.
Yeah.
That's because this is literally basically the cell that Jim Jones used to get his followers to go to Jonestown and kill themselves. Jim Jones preached some sort of racial utopia where black people and white people and Asian people could all just come together and love each other in some sort of unified community back during a time period when that really wasn't a thing that people did. So this is basically the exact same argument that this man was giving to me, that we could all just be in one loving community together. And I was like, this seems fine. Like, sure, why shouldn't we all be able to be together and like share our various practices and knowledge and stuff? Yeah, that seems fine. I thought. I didn't see anything wrong with this, and there's really inherently nothing wrong with the idea that a whole bunch of different kinds of pagans can come together and worship together. There's even a name for that, a group of pagans who come from different practices. It's called eclectic paganism. But that's not what he was selling. It just sounded like that's what he was selling. Mm-hmm. He did make me feel incredibly welcomed in his house. The man, and again, listen to his description. He's 5'2", if that. He's basically my height, and I'm 5'2". He's slender, dark hair, not unattractive, but not very attractive. He's got like a high-pitched voice. And man, that man can charm an entire room into listening to him talk for hours.
Damn.
He's very charismatic, as cult leaders are. There was food. There was wine. I don't drink, but there was wine. We ate a lot of good food. I met his wife. She was very nice, if 40 years younger than him.
Oof. Ooh, red flag.
Yeah, she was essentially the same age as his daughter, so yes, that was a big red flag.
Oh, red flag, red flag.
But, this is how they get you. I was going through a bad time, and I let it slide. He had tons of books. I literally, at this point, had never been around other pagan people, so I was very, fascinated by all these books, and, everybody's being very open, and, I just loved the environment. We did a little ritual. It was nice. I felt like very peaceful about the situation that I was in, because it felt like I found like a community where I didn't have to be just feeling awful all the time. And yeah, that's how they get you. And then they lead you into step number 3.
Mm-hmm. What's step 3?
Step number 3 is when the cult begins creating a new reality for you.
Oh.
This is the point where cults will try to keep you secluded from the rest of your life. And this doesn't happen usually overnight. Usually they build you up to getting to a point where you want to go away and leave the rest of your life behind and live inside the cult.
Mm-hmm.
So they might ask you to go to a retreat or a camping trip, just something that takes you literally away from people that you know and the place where you live. They'll try to keep you away from TV, books, things like that, to make you more and more enveloped in what the social scientists call a self-sealing system, like a bubble closed off from the rest of the world. So for me, Bert, the guy who was in charge of this, he probably like several months into my time in this cult, started talking about a weekend camping trip that he has a friend who lives in a secluded part of the state who owns, 100 acres of land, and we could all just go up there for a 3-day weekend and take our tents and just leave all of our worries and all of our material possessions behind and just be together and have food and good times and just not have to think about the rest of society.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Yeah, oh dear. Luckily for me, because at that point when he started talking about that, my husband was with me in this, by the way. So me and my husband were like, hell yeah, that sounds really fun. We should totally do that.
Oh, no.
At this point, we'd been with these people for months, and I felt at the time like I was friends with a lot of these people. And so months in, I was ready and willing to leave all my stuff and just take my tent and go camping for a 3-day weekend. And I tell Cody that thank goodness that this man could not like gather the funds to be able to like do this, because if he had been able to like procure the amount of money necessary, I do think he asked for donations, but we're all poor, so it didn't work out. If he had been able to secure the funds to be able to get us up there, secluded away from everybody else on one of another cult member's personal pieces of 100-acre property, I don't think we would have come back.
Ugh.
It's scary to think about.
Yeah.
That's incredibly scary.
So that's step 3. Step 4, this is where the leader really comes into play. And usually it's sort of around this time when people start meeting the leader. This cult that I was briefly a part of did things just a little unorthodoxly.
That's why it didn't work.
Yeah, this is probably why it didn't work, but I don't know. Now this is, you know what? That's not why it didn't work. He seemed like a very nice man, even though I knew he wasn't. He's a real way of convincing people that he's not a bad guy, and he is a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
But here is usually where the leader will come in. Then the leader will come in and tell you that he has all the right answers, that he's the only one who knows all the answers. These like hyper-religious cults, this is about the time when they start telling you that they're Jesus or God or God's mouthpiece or the new prophet or whatever. This is usually about the time when that starts happening. Bert never billed himself as being a god or like a god or even a mouthpiece of the gods even. But this is usually where those sorts of leaders start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They've already built up a new reality for you at this point. So now they're telling you that they can lead you down the right path. Everyone else is wrong. They encourage you to revere their opinions more than you do anybody else's. They'll try to manipulate you into a position where they want you to love them more than you love anybody else, even your own parents. So, and at this point, Bert was never really trying to make me love him more than I loved my mom or my grandparents, but he did push really hard against the narrative that he knew that I had heard about him, to the point where I didn't believe them when they told me I shouldn't keep going over there. So They would tell me, why are you going with her? Why are you going to do these meetings? Don't you know he's awful? Don't you know how much he abused her and what he did to her? And I would say, I mean, I mean, you guys have told me that, but she seems fine with him. So, I mean, if he was that bad, would she be hanging out with him?
Answer?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes. Unfortunately.
So I never really, like, cared about him more than I cared about my mom or my grandparents, but I did care about his opinions more than I cared about what they had to say about the situation, which is dangerously close to stepping over the line to caring more about him than them.
Yeah.
And then from here, they've got you isolated. They built up this new system of belief for you. They've started reeling you into the crazy stuff about their particular belief system. Then they sort of lead you into this conversation about how everybody else is a threat. They want to hurt you in some way. Setting up this idea of other groups being wrong or actively trying to hurt you sets up this idea in your mind that this place is the only place that you can feel safe. This man, these people are the only ones who get you and understand you and are going to protect you. The leader pushes ideas into you that, like, society is going to harm you for some reason, or like in religious-based cults, it's if you don't stay inside the cult, you're going to hell. Or if you don't stay inside the cult, you're going to go out there and then you're going to get raped and murdered. That's a very common one.
Mm-hmm.
And this was certainly the case for me. He pushed really hard on the idea that there was no other place for me to practice this religion and feel safe in a community of people who believed this sort of, in paganism, which is certainly not true. Arkansas, as much as you might think it doesn't, has a pretty thriving pagan community outside of this cult.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, paganism usually thrives where Christianity does as well. Because you have all the people who are, like, raised Christian, and then they're like, you know what, this actually sucks.
Yeah.
Not the religion,
That's-
everybody, just the people. Let's be clear.
Yes. That's certainly what pushed me away from it. Yeah. So then stage 6 is where the peer pressure starts coming back into play. You start with peer pressure and you basically end with peer pressure.
Mm.
Humans have, like, a fundamental desire to be part of a group, and that desire can override our perception of reality when we're in cult environments. And here's a really good example of how that works. Back in 1951, social psychologist Solomon Asch placed several students in a room. Everyone in the room was in on the experiment except for one person. So he showed everyone in the room a picture of 4 lines. Line A would be like half an inch long, and then line B would be half an inch long, and then line C and D would be some other amount of length that is drastically different than half an inch. And then he would ask everybody which lines were the same length. So A and B are the same length, right? I just said that.
Mm-hmm.
So he would ask every single person in the room before the person who was being experimented on. And all these people who knew what was happening would say, oh, it's D. Even if D is 4 inches long and A is half an inch long, all the other people in the room would say, it's D. And that's very wrong. But when you get to the person who doesn't know what's happening, they will almost always also say, it's D. Even though you can clearly see that it's not D. That is the wrong answer. But they have such a drive to not look stupid in front of everyone else that even though they can see that they're wrong, they will almost always still give the wrong answer if it's what everybody else said.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the psychology of how cults get you. They just work on the drive that you have to conform to a group of people and belong to a peer group that gets you, and they just prey on that. And then that just leads straight into number 7, which is the last one. Cult leaders use this psychology to exploit their members for money or sex, or to have them commit crimes or kill themselves. And once you are this deep in to the cult, it's very hard to see objectively that this is wrong, that this is not correct, that this is going to hurt you or hurt somebody else or whatever. I didn't get to step 7 because when I got to steps 5 and 6 and they started really unveiling the crazy stuff, I couldn't, because the crazy stuff about this cult, it wasn't that Bert thought that he was some sort of god reincarnated or whatever. It's when he told me that all the gods are aliens and that each Each one of them has their own planet in the universe. There are so many planets in the universe that every single god in existence is able to have their own planet. And when we picked the god who called to us, that we would go to that god's planet. And at this point, I couldn't suspend disbelief anymore.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think at that point I would be like, wow, okay.
That sounds like a Quizilla quiz I would take, though. Which god's planet do you belong to?
Both of you have seen me in person. I've got these tattoos on my wrists. And on my left wrist, I have one in Greek that says Athena, and on my right wrist, I have one in Greek that says Pan. And I got these tattoos during this point of my life.
Oh, shit.
So, on one side of things...
So that they... I'm sorry.
Ask your question.
So that they would know which planets you wanted to go to?
Yeah, essentially the thing was that this was the god and the goddess that I felt most connected to on a spiritual level. And so, according to their doctrine, because I named them as my god and my goddess, I would go to one of their planets, whichever one I, identified most with at some point. Now, I got the tattoos because I was really deep into this whole thing. And I do still feel very sort of connected to the ideology that goes with both of those deities. But I certainly don't believe that they're like real people who are going to come down out of outer space and carry me away.
That would be next level.
But wouldn't that be fun?
I mean, it certainly would if it were true.
Like, our intention is not to be making fun of or teasing you or anything. Like, because a lot of the time when you're going through it, it gets harder and harder and harder to see from a outside perspective what's going on, because you're in the middle of it. You can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. It gets you, and you're there. And when you're there, it gets harder and harder and harder to pull yourself out and recover from the indoctrination and the beliefs and everything. Like, a lot of it, it sounds like a narcissistic relationship to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it basically is.
That's why they separate you from people that you know and care about and that you find trustworthy. They separate you from them because they know that those people will, wake you up and be like, hey, this isn't healthy. Let's go for a walk. I don't know. So yeah, it's so hard to hear people talk about it, and like especially people who have to separate themselves from their families because they want to find this belonging, and it's like because they believe that the belonging that they have, that's like their families or their community or their friends, like that like people have let them down, and so they turn to this new thing that promises that they won't let you down and promises all these good things and love and life and healing. And it's like, of course you're gonna turn away from the things that have hurt you to embrace a new lifestyle. But like it's just something my dad always told me. If it sounds too good to be true, it is.
Yeah. And your dad has taught you some very valuable critical thinking skills.
Yeah. So like anytime I hear when I get credit offers or things like that, they're like, pay all your credit now, or like, we'll pay all of your credit for you. You don't even have to worry about it anymore. And I'm like, okay, but what are you really gonna do? Things like that. It's just like, this sounds too good to be true. And most of the time it is. I wish that I could impart that wisdom onto other people and protect them. Though. Yeah. It's hard to.
And do you have a cult experience?
Sort of yes and no. The comparison I made to the narcissistic relationship would be I hit step 7 and stayed in step 7 for a very long time. And step 7 also came with the baggage of being associated with the LDS church and everything like that. And it was very difficult because before that, I was educated very well in things like reject everything. Just do it. Just reject it. If it sounds too good to be true, then it's too good. Like Karen was saying. And like, I would just turn people away. If anybody asked me anything, I would turn them away. But when you're approached by somebody that you think, and they also think that they are well meaning, they absolutely believe in it, and they approach you with this, and you become part of it, you don't know that it's bad. Like, I ended up in this situation where I was separated from my friends, my family, everybody that I knew for a long period of time, and I moved to another country, like all that stuff. And of course, none of us knew what was going on. We thought it was just fine, but I had people who were coming to me that were saying what you're doing is wrong, and I said no, it's not, and kept going. So like when I see people in these situations, I'm not only sympathetic for the person who's being preyed upon, but for the person who legitimately believes that they're doing something good. And I've really struggled with this because some of these people, a lot of these people, they don't have this list of steps. This is just how it is. They aren't following a plan. They aren't it's not like a multi-level marketing thing where you have everything drawn out in front of you. It's they think they're giving you something that makes them feel good and included and happy, and including you in that and bringing you in and helping you to feel good and included and happy regardless of what the cost is.
Yeah. I always find it interesting to hear like people talk about these kinds of relationships, and it's like you never know that it's happening until you're on the other side of it, and then you kind of examine it and it's like, so that's what happened. And of course they don't intend it to be this way. Anyone ever intends it to be this way, and it's just like you start to wonder, like, is this even really what happened? Am I overanalyzing it? And I don't know. I don't know how to tell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's difficult. And obviously it's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. But like even if somebody is intending something good for you, they're still doing harm, that harm doesn't go away. And like all the time I think about these people who ended up in actual real big cults and communities where they became part of something and then they could not leave it. They couldn't have this perspective of after the cult. And there's so many people who will never have that experience. It troubles me very deeply. I'm very upset about that. Like,
What was that guy's name that led that cult in Oregon? What happened to the
what was
cult in Oregon? Hang on. Ah, yes, Rajneeshis.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. I'm glad we still share a single brain cell here. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Rajneesh. That was. Whew.
If you haven't, Remy, have you seen Wild Wild on Netflix?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. It's a very like comprehensive view of the Rajneesh movement. And it's a really like honestly, I want to say it was like a really beautiful like way of telling it, because it got everyone's perspectives, and it kind of shows the very like it really gets into kind of the psychological and the spiritual views of these people and how devoted they are to these like beliefs even after coming out of it. They're like, I still believe in these beliefs and these systems. They're like, I just, even after this terrible thing that we nearly did, it's very interesting.
It sounds like it. Leaving a cult can have an enormous psychological impact on somebody. Like, especially when you were born into a cult, like some people are, or if you've been in it for like a really long amount of time. When you leave it, you're basically having to relearn or learn for the first time how to function inside of normal society. And that's really awful. I was only in my cult for like 6 months, maybe. And even for me, I found it really hard to trust people inside of the pagan community again. And I certainly didn't have a relationship with that girl ever again. I shouldn't have continued to have a relationship with her anyway, because she's awful on a whole different level. But I'd still lost literally the entirety of the pagan community here in this state, because Seeker's Temple does events at the Pagan Pride gatherings here in Arkansas. Like, they set up booths and they give talks and do education series and stuff. Like, they still do that. So I can't go to Pagan Pride days anymore because I don't want to be anywhere near them.
Dang.
Jesus.
And now I feel like I can't trust anybody inside that community here in this state, even though that's not true. It's not true at all, but it gives me an enormous amount of anxiety. Like, these people are awful, and they're not even like a horrifically bad cult. They didn't ask me to kill anybody or to kill myself.
Mm-hmm.
They just have some really crazy beliefs, and I don't know where they're at now. And then maybe they have gotten to a point where they're being really bad. I mean, we were probably getting into the exploitation stage. He was probably going to start asking me to give up all my worldly possessions. But, man, I just think about how I can't be part of that community anymore and how awful that is. And I can't imagine what it's like for people who live inside of these cult relationships and groups for years and years and years. I can't imagine what it's like to come out of it and then have to relearn how to function.
It takes a lot away from people, like sense of safety and trusting other people, or not understanding how to interact with other people. Like, it's like coming out of from under a rock.
Sometimes it's like you come out and you've like been in a time capsule. Like, some people, are like kept in those, old-timey beliefs where it's like you have to wear old like cotton dresses and things like that, and the bonnets. Not like the Amish or the Mennonites. Those are different. That's a different thing. But like cults that do that. Like Handmaid's Tale.
There's certainly plenty of cults that really resemble Handmaid's Tale. It's like they picked that book up out of the 80s and said, this is a handbook for our new religion.
Oh, God, you're right, and it's awful.
Yep.
So that's all I've got about cult history and psychology. And whenever you guys are ready, I've got 2 Arkansas cults that are currently active that I can talk about, and 1 surprise cult that's brand new.
Let's go.
New cult just dropped.
But listen, guys, we should probably definitely end on the surprise cult because it's funny.
You're right. Yes. You're totally right.
And these two Arkansas cults are pretty awful and horrible, so we definitely shouldn't end on that note. We should end with the funny new one.
That's true. Well, why don't we pack these 2 Arkansas cults in the nice meat of sound meat sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I had this conversation at work today. They said, "Oh, I bet you're drinking some happy juice today, huh? I see you walking around with your little cup." And I said, "I don't drink. I have too many problems as it is." And they're like, "You know what? Yeah." Sound meat. Let's do it.
Okay, does that mean you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, the first one probably a lot more people have heard about. It's called the Alamo Christian Foundation.
Alamo Christian Foundation.
So, here's the background information.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you the background, and then I'm going to tell you the dark stuff.
Okay.
Tony Alamo... What?
She's a few seconds behind.
Yeah, I've got like a 3-second delay here, so don't mind me.
Okay, so Tony Alamo was born in 1934 as Bernie Hoffman. In the 1960s, he moved to Hollywood and worked as a pop singer, like a very low-level pop singer, under the name Mark Hoffman. He started his own weird little record label called Lil Mark.
No.
And then
Lil Mark, no.
I just spit out my I'm sorry. Oh, it reminds me, I used to date a DJ Pringle.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Oh no.
Oh, I was still in middle school, so it's okay.
That does make it better. All right. Other than that one, his other two record labels, quote, were called Alamo and Talamo Records. So it was during this time when he was sort of working as a pop singer, when he met his person that would be his wife. Her name is Susan. And he says that at this point, he had a vision from God that he needed to begin his ministry. And for reference, Tony Alamo was not born Christian, but supposedly he had a vision from God in the 60s that he needed to become a Christian minister. So Susan and him founded the Alamo Christian Foundation in 1969 in Hollywood. So what he started out doing is street preaching. You know, you see the people on the street corners yelling at you about Jesus.
Oh yeah, sandwich boards and all.
That's what he started out doing, being a street preacher. And then as his congregation grew, he would utilize the young members of the group, the children and young adults, as I mentioned way back previously, to go out onto the streets and try to convince people to convert to their brand of Christianity and to come with them to their meeting group, their meeting area, which was an hour outside of the city. So they would give people pamphlets and stuff and then promise them food and just fellowship. And so people went to eat some food and have some fellowship. And then he just sort of steadily built up his base from that. And it wasn't until 1976, almost a full 10 years later, that the group moved to Arkansas, specifically Dyer, Arkansas. It's sort of near Alma. Susan grew up there. So here they acquired a huge plot of land and built their compound on it and grew by hundreds and hundreds of people. They had several hundred members by the time they came to Arkansas. Here they established a printing facility, a school, and a tabernacle, either on their property or in the city of Alma, which was nearby. They also ran a drug rehabilitation center and several other businesses in the area.
Okay.
As they expanded, Alamo started several satellite churches of the Alamo Christian Foundation in Nashville, Chicago, Brooklyn, and Miami, as well as the one that was still going on in Hollywood. The most famous of the cult's businesses was their jacket business. They would buy denim and leather jackets, and then they would airbrush them with cool designs or bright, colorful designs and stuff. Some pretty famous celebrities have bought and worn these jackets, like Dolly Parton, Burt Reynolds, and probably the most visible and famous one that you can immediately picture is the modified leather jacket that Michael Jackson wore on the cover of his album Bad.
Oh,
what?
Yes. During this time, they also published religious tracts, produced tapes and records, and they started a national television program, and they had a radio program. Basically, this cult boiled down to its most, keywords. They were anti-Catholic, apocalyptic, and Tony Alamo proclaimed himself to be the true world prophet.
Okay, sure.
It forbade its members from things like, drug use and stuff like that, but it also forbade them from getting abortions, taking birth control, practicing homosexuality, and it required its members to take a vow of poverty wherein they would give up all of their money and property to Tony Alamo and Susan Alamo.
Of course.
here's where we're going to take a sharp turn into the dark stuff.
Okay.
Are you ready? This is where all those trigger warnings really come into play.
All right, I'm sitting here ready for it. I've been prepping all night.
Okay. Former members of the cult have said in interviews that Tony Alamo required them to worship him like a god. These members of the cult were used as free labor to work in these businesses and to even produce those jackets that people like Dolly Parton and Michael Jackson were wearing.
Mm-hmm.
They were not paid. This was slave labor. If they didn't do it, they were beaten. They could be beaten for any number of reasons. One of the former cult members named Benjamin Risha, who has done a lot of interviews and I think written a book, talked about how people would be beaten for holding hands with a girl, for looking at a girl, for questioning things that they were told to do. He went so far as to say that at one point he watched his friend, and this is going to be really hard, he watched his friend struck with a piece of wood more than 100 times.
Oh my God.
For some sort of... Yeah, and
Sorry.
for nothing big, for some sort of like very small infraction. So that's what was going on behind the closed doors: slave labor and horrible, horrible child abuse. In 1982, Susan Alamo died from breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And here, Tony Alamo had her body moved from the hospital to the compound here in Arkansas. She died in Texas. He brought her back to Arkansas and then put her on the compound on display and told the cult members that, like Christ, she would rise from the dead in 3 days if they were devout enough.
Oh, boy. Nope.
So he displayed her body and had the members of the cult, children and adults, sort of like rotating in prayer shifts to pray over her body for 3 days, supposedly, but that went on for 6 months.
Oh my God.
Oh no, that... The smell. Oh, the smell.
Yep.
And there were...
As someone who works around death, I can tell you that a 6-month-old corpse is going to be pretty rank.
I mean, there were children there, and probably were there the children required to be in the prayer circle?
Yes, adults and children prayed over her body. Benjamin Risha talks about this in his interviews, about how when he was a young man, I think 16 and 17 or something like that, he was required to pray over her with everybody else.
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he says that this was the event that made him stop wanting to be part of the cult. Because I think he was born into it, or he was either born into it or he was extremely young when his parents brought him into it. What makes people stop attending cult meetings and run away and stuff is usually because they learn that the leader is not everything that he has said. So at this point, Benjamin Risha says that it was then that he realized that Tony Alamo was not God. He was not a prophet. Because if he was those things, when he said she would come back to life in 3 days, she would have, and that she didn't. And that shattered his faith in the cult. So he ran away.
Good on him.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. So 6 months in, he finally buried the body in a glass heart-shaped coffin on the property.
How do you... I mean, I'm sure that people have done it, but also... What?
Also, in the 80s, shortly after his wife died, Tony Alamo started taking child brides.
Oh no!
No,
Hate that.
that's
Dislike.
Disgusting.
As young as 8.
Oh, God,
No.
dude, no! Fuck's sake!
Multiple?
What is? There wasn't
Multiple. He practiced polygamy with children under the age of 18 always. He said in a radio program run by his church that, quote, "When a woman starts their periods, then they are a woman, according to God's word. They should be able to be married at 13, 14, 15, and in some cases, if they have menstruated already, 12.
Nope.
fuck.
Nope.
I don't know what it is about all these weird fucking horny cult dudes who just want to screw kids. That's so fucking wrong. And they just find themselves in situations where they're like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna do that, and no one's gonna stop me.
Yep,
And
I
no
guess
one
when you build
stops
yourself
them.
up to be a... No. if you build yourself up to be God in the eyes of all of these people, then nobody's going to stop you because you're God. I know so much about so many cults that literally do this exact same thing. And also I know so many things about so many cults that do this exact same thing in even more upsetting ways. In the 90s, Alamo was arrested for sex trafficking children as young as 9 across state lines.
Oh my god!
What the fuck? Why are people terrible?
Yes. It only took a few hours for the courts here in Arkansas to find him guilty, and he was sentenced to, I think, 175 years in prison.
Thank
Good.
fuck.
God damn.
He died in 2017.
Good riddance. Fuck him.
Exactly. Now, the problem is, this cult is still active in this state.
No.
Even though he died in 2017, and even though he went to prison in the 90s, there are still people who believe in the things that he was teaching them and who still consider themselves affiliated with the Alamo Christian Foundation, even though he's dead. Benjamin Rishi says, and the other guy who was in the interviews, whose name I don't remember, I'm so sorry, they said that they keep in contact with people from that life and that they still know a lot of people who still consider themselves affiliated with the church, quote, quote, and that they are so much still active in this state that they do still actively try to recruit on, like, college campuses.
Jeez. No. That's not allowed. Not on my campus. Get out.
Yep.
That's not okay.
It ain't.
So there's that one.
I got a little mini insertion here that you reminded me of. I recently became aware of a cult called Love Has Won, and they had worshipped a woman who called herself Mom or Mother God, like you had mentioned, Karen, but it's completely different. Somehow they always, like, it's convergent evolution with cults,
Yes.
I swear to God. But the way I found out was the leader of the cult died after, having said that she's lived 500 something lifetimes and has been everything and all that stuff. And the reason I was reminded of this was when she died, nobody outside of the cult knew until they recovered her mummified corpse on a shrine.
What?
Yes, and apparently she was wrapped up in Christmas lights and her eyes were taken out.
Oh no.
Yeah, and like they would pray to the corpse as Mother God, even though really, like, if you followed only her teachings and not the weird shit that she did, she probably would have been reborn right then. I don't even know, man, but they just had her dead body there, and there were kids in this cult. Not great. It's gotta smell so bad. And they took out her eyes. Like, why?
When people die, their eyes get very creepy to look at very fast. I can only imagine. Listen, I said it earlier, I work with death frequently. I'm currently working with COVID patients, which means that I'm working with a lot of death. But even before that, I was working with death. One of my primary duties is post-mortem care, and people's eyes get very creepy to look at, probably like 5 minutes after they die.
You know what? This makes sense. The one time that I got to cut open eyeballs and accidentally got eyeball juice all over my hands and everything, it did not take very long for eyeballs to liquefy and just kind of get gross.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I forgot to mention, the lady had glitter makeup on when they found her.
Wow.
The woman, she was dead for like 3 months before. Like,
That's bad.
Yeah, the body was so badly decomposed they could not recover fingerprints. So,
oh God.
Yeah.
Man. So that was your, like, little break between my two awful things?
Yeah, I mean, like...
Yours was not at all awful.
Well, yeah, the things that they did were just, like, once in a while they would lock a kid in the closet kind of thing. But I didn't really learn all of that much from what I looked at. I mean, she said that she could talk to Robin Williams, and she was Jesus Christ in one of her past lives, and she could cure cancer, but she also maybe died of cancer. But they said that the cure for cancer was other people's faith, and if they didn't believe enough, then the cancer wouldn't go away. So,
well, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, the cult believed that she died because nobody believed enough, kind of thing, and there was emotional abuse and financial abuse going on, obviously, but it was weird. But she's dead now, thankfully.
She's dead now.
Let's go back to hell.
Yep, let's do it. And I can tell you that the devil of this hell is still alive.
Oh.
So this one is called, and there's some really complicated Hebrew / Hindu / weirdly Asian, but not quite, names in here, and I'm going to try my best, but when I Googled how to pronounce these names, it appears he maybe just made them up. So
lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, this cult is called the Nazira Monastic Community.
Mm-hmm.
And they operate about 30 miles south of Yellville, which is right at the top of our state.
Oh, that's 30 miles too far into the state.
Yeah, it is. The guy who runs this cult, he has about 15 different names, but condensed down to the first and the last part of it, he goes by Reverend Nazirmora Kadem.
Okay.
When people have asked him about his origins, where he was born and stuff, he will tell them that he is eternal, but census records will show that he was born in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Oh, dear. Okay.
He was born into a Catholic family, and then at some point in his adulthood, he converted into a movement that is called the Black Hebrew Israelites, which are a group that believe that they belong to a lost Jewish tribe.
Oh, okay.
And then from there, he moved to Mississippi, where he started his first religious commune as a mixture of Hindu and Buddhist beliefs.
Okay.
Then, in the 90s, he moved here into Arkansas. He had a couple dozen members at this point. His cult was basically as big as it was ever going to be at 30 or some odd members. And he moved them all here into Arkansas and started his Nazira monastic community and billed it as a survival commune, preparing for the eventual downfall of civilization when Y2K happened.
Oh, and what happened when Y2K didn't happen?
When Y2K didn't happen, he rebranded into a spiritual retreat. And this is the point where he really became a cult. He took a sharp veer into crazy and right into crazy and cult.
Oh no.
So
what was the big crazy?
Okay, so here's what happened. The members of this cult, they had to agree to relinquish all possessions, past relationships, and their birth names.
Oh, shit.
They were prohibited from speaking at all unless they were spoken to specifically by Kadem himself.
Oh, shit.
So they took a vow of silence, that's including the children.
Oh, no.
Yes, and when they were allowed to speak, which again was only when they were directly spoken to by the Reverend, they had to speak in a language called, I think, Sagala, which is a made-up language that he fabricated from Aramaic.
Oh, I hate this. I hate this a lot.
How do you teach other people this fictional language?
I mean, to be fair, to this point, the written language and the spoken language from the Atlantis movie that Disney or one of the Disney subsidiaries or whatever made is so much so a real language that you can learn it.
Well, okay, it's one thing to make it for entertainment purposes. Like, let's talk, like, not even going to talk about Lord of the Rings or Star Trek, but, like...
Yes. So basically the point is, if he had like really put in the effort, he could teach other people his made up language. I don't think he put in the effort, though. I haven't heard the language, but I don't think he probably put forth the effort to make it a real actual language.
Yeah, you double check and then it's just Pig Latin.
The final piece of this is that his members were required to do all of these things, and then they had to take an oath that was called the Nasir Order of the Purple Veil. And it was called that because they were required to wear purple from head to toe.
Jeez.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah. People in surrounding towns called them the Purple People, and their own website is even called the Purple People.
That's like the Rajneesh.
Oh yeah, they did red.
Yeah, they wore red.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably a lot of cults that color code for some reason.
Mine would be pink.
Mine would be green.
Same. I already basically do only one shade every time I get dressed. But today I did blue, which was different. Usually I'm in all green. I have green pants. I have like green underwear. I have green shirts. I have green hair clips. I'm the weird green person. But today I wore a whole lot of denim.
Weird.
And Karen called me out.
Yeah, they wore their their tuxedo. Their
My
denim
tuxedo, excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh no, that sounds like such a strange outfit. I'm so sorry.
I did notice because I had a shawl on, so, and that wasn't denim. It was like white wool, so we're good.
Yeah, it's fine.
My socks are blue.
Wow.
My socks are blue.
Let's go back to the made-up language.
Sure. They had to wear all purple, yeah.
Right.
So after they moved to Arkansas, and his group had set up shop deep in the Ozarks, at this point in time, he either already had or acquired throughout this time 5 wives at least and 13 children.
Oh gosh.
And it should be noted that he already had a child from when he still lived in Chicago.
Oh Jesus.
Naturally.
So yes, they subsisted almost entirely on like things that they could grow themselves, chopping their own firewood or buying organic food in bulk from the nearby towns. And they also survived by the women and the older children manufacturing spiritual merchandise and crafts that they would sell online or at local festivals, but entirely silently. They were still not allowed to speak even when they were out doing these things.
Oh dear.
His own 13 children were not allowed to leave the premises at all.
What?
They were not homeschooled. They were not provided with medical care. Along with the adults, they were expected to fast and to meditate for 3 hours a day, morning, noon, and dusk.
Jeez.
So in 2010, a woman named Shekinah, who is Kadem's 4th wife, who had been living inside of this cult for, I believe it said 20 years, the accounts that I was reading directly from her. She ran away from the commune with their 5 children, ranging in ages from 18 to 25.
Wow.
Good for her. God damn.
She told her husband that she was going to take a leave of absence, but then she just never came back.
Good for her. She's like, we're done.
Yeah, she was done with it. 8 years later, on a radio documentary that she did, she called them out on subjecting her and the children to some extreme physical abuse and starvation. And then a bunch of other members left and came forward with similar allegations. But this being Arkansas, it's not surprising that the local law enforcement didn't do anything about it, and there aren't even any records to show that she made those claims.
Damn.
Yep. In 2016, Several of the Reverend's grown children, accompanied by his daughter from Chicago, traveled back to the commune to confront him. He denied all of their claims, said that they were lying, and then 2 years later, 2 of his adult children that Shekinah ran away with committed suicide.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so today, 2021, Kadem still operates the Nazira monastic community, right where it has been on its 100 acres of land in the Ozarks. He has rebranded it online as an eco-village, and there is reportedly only just one female devotee left who serves as his caregiver and the site's caretaker.
Christ. What a fucking nightmare. Like, this is what I was saying earlier. Just, I mean, we were all talking about it. Coming out of that, just dealing with the damage it does to you, it's immense. And, man, fucking... the fact that it's close, like, when you usually talk about cults, you know, there's, like, this degree of separation, because you're like, that's not even here, wow, these people are fucked up, and then you sit and you realize, like, this is going on all the time, all around you, whether you know it
in
or
your
not.
own backyard.
Yep. Now all I have left is the funny new one.
Yeah, give us that new one.
Oh, give us the new fun cult. Oh.
Okay, so I do want to start by saying that these people currently are not in the guidelines that classifies a group as a cult.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I'm just going to predict that they're going to turn into one, so we're going to talk about it.
Okay. Yes, please.
So nowadays, social scientists say that cults are really difficult to find because they're not just physical anymore. Now you've got a lot of cults that start up online. Mm-hmm. You get cults that start up on Facebook or Parler or wherever. This is how you get people like QAnon and the 4chan people who go out and like shoot a bunch of women because they won't have sex with them. So social scientists are studying like forums in these places that are reinforcing the same cult behaviors that they've been studying for decades and decades now. And so that being said, this group that is not a cult yet, but might turn into one, started on Facebook last year in June of 2020.
What? This is really new.
Yeah, as a little over a year after they began, they now have 23,000 members in their group.
Jesus.
Wow. That's a lot.
Now, from this group's own website, their About page begins with this quote: "From all over the world, heroes have emerged to plan the creation and worship of our great Leviathan lobster god."
Oh, yes.
What?
Karen, you sound like...
Is this like on the same level of like the spaghetti monster people?
Let me tell you. This is a group of people who probably started out as a joke, but I think that they are rapidly devolving into an area where it's going to get very out of their control. This started because there is a misconception that lobsters are immortal. And according to like scientists, marine scientists, and like the Smithsonian and stuff, lobsters are not actually immortal. The myth began because lobsters don't deteriorate as they age, and rather they just continue to grow forever until eventually they grow so large that they can't support their own body mass anymore. They stop being able to take in enough oxygen, and they stop being able to molt. And so then they eventually just die.
Mm-hmm.
But they live for a very long time. And so this group started up because they decided that if you just left the lobster alone, it might just theoretically live forever. And so they have decided that if they grow a lobster and help it molt, that the lobster will be immortal and will eventually grow to Leviathan proportions.
Oh my gosh. No. The answer is no, but oh my gosh.
Yeah. So lobsters molt regularly, and just in case you don't know what molding is, it's the process of shedding the hard outer exoskeleton once they've gotten too big for it. The process is really difficult and stressful for most animals who do that, but lobsters in particular have a difficult time with it because, you know, they're swapping out their entire skeletal structure.
Yeah.
So as they get older and the bigger that they get, the harder it is. And this group says, well, hey, we can raise our new crustacean leader, always lending a hand during the stressful and difficult molting process. Their official plan states, quote, "We are going to take a lobster, help it molt its shell over several generations, and create a Leviathan god. Here, we will plan our god's birth and rise to divinity. His acolytes are at risk and must be protected. Any creature with magic blood is obviously descended from the gods."
Oh my god.
Finally, a religion I can get behind.
So the reason that I am concerned about this group, is that it's not really a cult. It started, I think, largely as like a joke group, but now it has 23,000 members in it and a whole website. There are plenty of cults that didn't start out necessarily with the intention of becoming cults. I've researched enough cults and listened to enough podcasts about cults and watched enough cult documentaries to know that there are plenty of cults that did not begin life as a cult. They did begin life as fellowship or, like a Bible study group or whatever, until the leader of the cult got deluded and deranged and decided that they were going to take things in a bad direction. And there have even been some instances where it didn't start as a cult and the leader didn't even consciously do it, but the followers raised them up so much to the point where it turned into a cult. So even though this started as a joke, it is a little bit concerning because they have a website, and on their website, they have a page called Sermons. And when you look at the sermons on their website, and I've listened to a couple of them now, they're not very long. They have sermons that are titled Allies, which are subtitled, "Would you like to make more friends? The Leviathan lobster god is here to help with that."
Okay. No,
Or,
thank you.
or another video is called Molting Care, subtitled, "Ever needed someone to watch your back? The Leviathan lobster god is here for you." And this verges very dangerously close to like the language that cults use to get people into the cult. It gets very uncomfortable when you start talking like a cult, even if you're doing it for jokes, because at some point, out of 23,000 plus members, you're going to eventually hit a group of members that take it too far, which is exactly what has happened with a lot of other online cults. So they're not a cult yet, and they're funny, and it's kind of fun to joke about them, but it is concerning how very cult-like the language that they use is.
Mm-hmm.
But on the positive side, they do a lot of beach cleanup.
Well,
at least there's that. Of course, you could always go in the direction of the Pastafarians, the spaghetti monster god people, which
Yes.
that's a whole other can of pasta. But
That's a whole other colander of spaghetti.
And when you open up this Leviathan lobster god website, it's like a big dark background that says "free yourself," and then like,
oh yeah, I have linked the Lobster God website over here in our Discord to their sermons page, since I know Karen is on Do Not Disturb.
Ah, yes, thank you.
oh gosh,
Oh, I love the I love the thumbnail for it.
these thumbnails are
It looks like a very despondent Jesus.
goth Jesus. That's probably why he's the one doing it. Damn. I hope it doesn't go that far.
I hope that they just keep it light and fun.
Yeah, I would hope that it stayed in the same sort of level as what the Flying Spaghetti Monster stuff is, or like the First Church of the Jedi, or whatever it's called. Something that's just silly, and maybe gets a lot of followers, but doesn't ever go into anything like serious or dangerous. But any group that gets to like have thousands and thousands and thousands of members and uses cult-like language has the potential to turn into a cult. So it's a very funny one. And so it is a good light note to end on, but I did want to make the note that this could be problematic in the future.
Yes, if it happens, we'll just point to this and
We'll say, hey,
Remy called it.
Remy told you so.
That's all I've got, guys.
That's great. You did so good, Remy. This was awesome.
Thanks everyone for coming in and joining us for a really long super episode.
we are taking more questions. So if you don't mind, would you do us a favor and email us at whywouldyouskthatpod@gmail.com, or you could hit us up at our website, whywouldyouskthat.com. We got a form on there that is nice and easy to use. You go in, you ask your question, you hit submit, and all we ask is that you don't ask anything personal about us. We want weird. We don't want weird. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.